you for tuning into Balanced Black Girl podcast. My name is Les. I am your host. And on this show, I talk about everything that we are balancing in life. But most of our conversations are really rooted in self-care. And self-care can look and feel so many different ways. Over the past almost 6 years of doing this show, I've talked about wellness and self-care, all of the various things that we can do to take better care of ourselves. But there's been one practice that has been a constant in my life, has been a constant recommendation that I'm always sharing. And I'm really excited to dig into it today. And that is journaling. And I'm also joined today by an amazing guest, Miss Nya Jones, who is the founder of an incredible brand called Inside Then Out that creates incredible self-care products, namely really beautiful journals to support your journaling practice. So please join me in welcoming Nya to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
I'm so happy to have you while you're visiting New York.
I know.
We're like spending the whole day together because we're recording, or we're going to be on a panel later tonight.
I know. We're going to be talking all day. So
Yes.
I'm excited.
So we're going to kick it off here.
Of course.
Yeah. So I would love to start off by talking more about your personal wellness journey, particularly when it comes to journaling. So how did your love of journaling start, and how has that evolved to what it is today?
Yeah. So my love of journaling actually started when I was very young. So I've been journaling since I was 7 years old. I still have journals from when I was such a child. And it's so great to look back at those journals now as an adult and just see the things that I was reflecting on, stressed about at such a young age. But it was one of those practices that brought me back to myself at different stages of my life. I definitely was not journaling consistency since 7 years old, but it was one of those practices that just made me feel like I had a little bit of mental clarity. So since I was a young girl, I always was super stressed and overthinking and had a really hard time opening up to people. And journaling was like my one safe place where I was like, okay, it's just me and my thoughts. And yeah, it's just been such an amazing journey. One of those moments where I came back to journaling was in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic. And it was just a low period for me. It was a period where on paper, I was doing a lot of the things that I was supposed to do. I had just graduated from college. I was starting my first job after college as a 9 to 5 at Meta. So many people were telling me like, oh, you're doing great. But I just wasn't feeling great. I was feeling really distant from myself. I was asking myself a lot of questions. I was like, why am I doing these things in life? I'm not really happy. I'm not really fulfilled. I'm constantly stressed and overwhelmed. So I went back to journaling and I wrote a list of questions that I wanted to answer for myself. And that's how I had the idea to create Inside Then Out and the Better Everyday Journal. And it's just been such an amazing journey ever since.
Okay, I want to dig more into you journaling when you're 7. Like, how did you stumble upon that practice at such a young age? And also, I'm curious, you said you still have some of the journals. What were some of the things that 7-year-old Nya was writing about?
Like I have this one journal entry that still makes me laugh to this day. It's literally says like, people like me because I'm smart. And I'm like, yes, like I love the confidence of 7-year-old Nya.
Yes.
And I remember another one, super, super random, but I remember having a huge hate for Home Depot because my dad liked to build stuff. And he would always bring me to Home Depot as a child. And I remember writing about how we had spring break coming up and I did not want to go to Home Depot at all. And I was like so upset about it. So it's so funny, like the little things that you used to be upset about when you were a little kid. But I got introduced to journaling actually through my parents, which is really cool. It's something that they always encouraged me to do since I was a young age. And it's something that really stuck because I was like, actually, this feels good. And in the beginning, it's kind of like your diary and you're like, dear diary, this is what happened. But I think as you get older, something that happened in my life is my journal became a very like, depressing place. It was something I always came back to when I was like at rock bottom. I was going through something, whether it's a breakup or a big life change. I would always write in my journal and then I would look back and be like, dang, like this is a really sad space. But something that has been important to me in my journal practice today is talking about all the things, like the good things too. Something that I know you talk about is like best case scenario journaling. And that's something I've actually personally tried after watching your video. And I was like, I love this. So something that we're really trying to do with the guided journals is have a little bit of everything. I think that's the nature of wellness is some days are going to feel great and some days are not. And the journal is like a great way to keep track of all those emotions and look back at it.
Oh, definitely. I love what you said about using it as a tool for both the good and the bad. I similarly used to journal a lot as a kid. I'm like a few years older than you. And so I started journaling because I was super obsessed with Moesha when I was little. And such a big part of Moesha was like her journal entries and her, I'm hearing the Moesha music in my head right now. And so I would see her do it. And so I was like, oh, I want to do this. And then it would turn into like writing all of these different things, whether it was short stories or how I wanted my day to go or different things as a kid. And had a really similar experience, especially when I was like a teenager. Looking back on things that I would write, it would be really, really depressing. And learning how to embrace it as a tool for all times, not just like angst.
Yeah.
It's so freeing.
Yes, it really is. And something too that I think is really important to write and journal about is just gratitude and like the good things that are happening in your life and goals. There's so many different things that you can write about. But like we were talking about before, there's definitely no right or wrong way to do that.
Oh, absolutely. So many times when I've shared content about journaling, even like best case scenario journaling, like you mentioned, all of the comments are like, wait, but do I do it like this? But how often do I do it? And do I have to say it like this? And the whole point is that it's tailored to you. It's like, what is on your heart? What is on your mind? What is it that you need right now? Obviously, I'm a big proponent of education, but I think school has taught us that there's like a right and a wrong way to do it, or we feel like we're going to be graded. And something beautiful about journaling is like there is no right or wrong way.
And there's no judgment. Like it's supposed to be your space. And I know something else that people struggle with is sometimes they write from a perspective of someone else is going to read this. And I think that's really just inhibiting you from really being able to fully express yourself. But yeah, there is no judgment in journaling and it's your own pages and nobody else is supposed to read it. So I think that is one of the most amazing things about finally having a space that is like your own thoughts. No one is telling you whether you're right or wrong. There's no response to your journal entries. It's just your inner thoughts.
Absolutely. And for people who aren't used to journaling, I think even just seeing a blank piece of paper can be so intimidating. And why I think the Better Everyday Journal is such a great tool is because it starts with these really beautiful prompts. And then there's space for people to put whatever comes to mind. Is that a reflection of your journal practice? How did you come up with that?
Yeah. So similarly, I have been journaling since I was younger. So I did feel a little bit comfortable like with the blank page. Like I knew that it was a space where I could just write whatever. But when I was reaching a stage in my life, which was in 2020 during the pandemic, I was just feeling really far from myself. And through that journey, I was like, why am I doing the things I'm doing? I was asking myself a lot more questions during that period. And I was like, oh, it would be so nice to have a tool that kind of guided me through a lot of these life questions that I'm having in my life right now. So it was a list of questions that I wanted to answer for myself. And I remember looking online briefly too. I'm like, oh, there should be a guided journal that kind of does this for you. And there was a few, but not quite what I was looking for to really walk you through some of these core life themes that a lot of people are thinking about when they're navigating their 20s, 30s. And so I decided that I could be the person to create it.
It's so good. Something that I've talked a lot about on the podcast is curiosity and like having a sense of curiosity and asking yourself questions. And I think that's why the prompts are so good because it's not telling you what to think. It's giving you a nugget to think about and then the space to express yourself fully.
Yeah. And I think it's not normal to ask yourself these questions on a daily basis. And that's something that I'm trying to curate with like this brand is that curiosity is even like curiosity with yourself. Sometimes a lot of people think about learning and they think about books or even podcasts or classes that they can take. But sometimes like the best learning you could do is just sitting with yourself a little bit longer and asking yourself questions.
Oh, yeah. And asking yourself, coming back to those questions, because how you answer a question today could be totally different than how you answer it even in 3 days because you're a different person all the time.
So true. So true.
It's like that self-check-in.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
important. So another theme of your story that I really loved and I would love to dig into more is the difference between how something feels versus how it looks. So you had talked about being fresh out of college, having this great job at Meta. On paper, everything looks great from the outside, but it wasn't feeling like it resonated with you. Can we talk a little bit more about the difference between those two things?
Yeah, I think a lot of our lives is curated by a lot of external influences. So what people tell you should do. I remember even from a young age, I was always a really ambitious person, but I also think it was very much a trauma response. It was something where I felt like I was only being celebrated when I accomplished something great. So I always felt this pressure to be great in everything that I was doing. And again, I mentioned like I was doing the things, like I went to college, I got a job, I did the things that my parents wanted me to do and that people were celebrating me for. But internally, I just was not feeling fulfilled. And I think that comes back to that point of being like internally curious, because you have to ask yourself, like, why are you doing the things that you're doing? And a lot of the things we decide to do because we think that other people will be proud of us or other people will give us our flowers for doing it. But at the end of the day, like, you are the person that can make yourself happy the most. So really just sitting with yourself and understanding, why am I doing the things I'm doing and how can I align my decisions more with my identity and not external influences?
Yeah. Oh, I just thought of a really good idea. Homework for everybody. Based off of what you just said. Stroke of inspiration. Homework for everybody to do in your journal or in your calendar. Look at the things on your calendar. I'm going to do this too. We can check in. Comment on my latest Instagram post. Let me know how this goes. Let's look at what we have on our calendar or the things on our to-do list and just have a little why next to it. Why am I in this meeting?
Mm.
Why do I have this on my list to do? Why am I putting pressure on myself to do X, Y, Z on a day-to-day basis? And just see, why am I doing this? How do I want it to make me feel?
Yeah.
So that we don't go through life on autopilot.
Exactly. And I think that is so important. Even as a founder, I struggle with that a lot because there's a big aspect of being a founder that people tell you, oh, these are the things that you need to do to be a good business owner. A lot of that has to do with how you show up on social media, your personal branding. You have to be doing speaking engagements and podcasts and things like that. And at some point, I sat with myself. I'm like, these things actually don't fulfill me. And I had to make a list of the things that I love to do as a founder. Of course, not every aspect of being a founder you're going to love, but it's important to know like what things actually bring you joy and what aspects of the role actually feel good for you and what is for other people.
Oh, such a good point. And it's like, not everything is going to feel good, but does the why resonate for everything?
Exactly.
Because it should.
Exactly.
Ideally.
Ideally.
We know life be life. I want to talk a little bit more about just self-care from the inside, because I think since the beginning of social media, the idea of self-care has been something that's been very external. When people would think of self-care, they would think of these external practices, beauty maintenance, bubble baths, and things like that. And those things, it can feel like self-care. I'm not talking down on it. I
love it.
Love it. Like when you look good, you feel good, and that's great. But I do think over the past few years, there has been such an increased emphasis on that because of social media that we forget how important it is to make sure that the inside is catching up with the outside. And I feel like that ties so well to your brand, inside then out, because it's all about starting from the inside. I would love to hear your experiences with that.
And I think lately wellness has very much become an aesthetic. So even on social media, I love that there's conversations about wellness and mental health and self-care. I think that's amazing because first and foremost, we need it in all forms. But something that I think is a little bit toxic in our current internet culture is this idea of what wellness looks like. And usually from like the wellness influencers, it's very much like these super long morning routines or these self-care days that include getting your hair done and your nails done at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday when most of us have a 9 to 5 or a job that we're working. So I think the most important thing is figuring out what is manageable for you. And it is so true that wellness really comes from the inside, because it's so crazy that the brand is named Inside Then Out because it's so relevant even today. And I think back to myself in 2020 and the things that I was thinking then. But I think in today's society, it's so easy to get distracted by external noise. So we're constantly consuming so much media, even the media that is good for you. Sometimes it is a lot. There's always somebody that's telling you what you should do and what you shouldn't do and what your morning routine needs to look like. And I think the most important things is really taking time to look inside to yourself and figure out what brings you joy. Why are you doing the things that you're doing? What do you think your own purpose is? And letting that influence the decisions that you have in your life, and not just what somebody else is doing, what someone else's routine looks like, because it may be completely different for you.
That's such a good point. Are you influencing yourself?
Yes, exactly. Influence yourself.
You should be your own biggest influence,
yes.
and external influences are fine, but they shouldn't outweigh what it is you need.
Exactly. And I think even like the highest version of yourself or the best version of yourself is still yourself. And I think it's really important, even when you're defining who that character is for you, that it's really rooted in your own intention and your own joy and purpose.
Oh, most definitely. Okay, this is going to sound unrelated, but I promise it's related. I'm going to bring it back home, and maybe you've seen this. There's this video that's been circulating on TikTok of this young woman. She's beautiful, super pretty. And she was saying how when dudes that are maybe not as attractive hit on her or step to her, it makes her question herself. She's like, am I like, why do they think they have, a chance with me or whatever? And she's talking more about what it is that she actually wants. Like, this is the kind of guy who should come hit on me. He should be, he should look like this. He should have this much money. He should be this tall. He should whatever. That's totally fine. I think everybody can want what they want. So I totally get it. But what made me feel sad for her when I was watching that video was she was like, oh, these, ugly dudes step to me and it hurts my self-esteem. And there were a few things that I was thinking of. One, other people should not have that much power over your self-esteem. Two, these qualities that you're listing off of what you want, whether that's in a person or what you want in a job or an apartment or whatever, do you want those things because you genuinely want them, or do you want them because if you have them, you want people to feel a certain way about you? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Are those qualities that you're genuinely attracted to? If so, great. Or do you think people will think highly of you if you have a person with certain qualities, or if you have a job at a certain company, or the bright wellness influencer apartment with the big windows and the open white kitchen? Is it because you want people to perceive you a certain way because you have those things, or do you genuinely want it because that's a desire on your heart? And again, you can want what you want, but make sure you want it because you genuinely want it, not because you want people to think highly of you if you have it.
Yeah. And I think a great way to check in with yourself on that is like, if nobody knew, if I didn't share this on social media, or if this person never met my friends or my family, would I genuinely be happy? You are the person that has to live with this person, like nobody else. It doesn't honestly matter what anybody else thinks, because again, it's your life, and you never want to look back at your life and be like, what did I do this for? Why did I choose this person? Because social media told me to?
Right.
Definitely not.
Right. Why did I choose this person? Why did I choose this job? Well, all of these things, I think we make these choices not because this is what resonates with us, but because we want people to think highly of us.
And I remember I had a little bit of a crisis, not a big one, but just a little bit of a crisis when I was first leaving my 9-to-5, and making that decision was a really, really big one for me, because I had always imagined that I was going to be in corporate life for a lot longer. And I was working for this great company. I was making good money, and my parents were proud of me. People, like, I loved being able to say like, oh yeah, like this is what I do for work. I was proud. But internally, I felt terrible. Like, I was actually so unhappy. And towards the end, it was really, really taxing on my mental health, on my physical health. I realized at that point too, because I was just missing meetings. I would just felt off. I wasn't being my true self. I wasn't bringing my full self to work. And so I had come to that stage where I had to make that decision. And it was scary because, again, there was so much of my life was like, okay, I felt like every experience was leading up to this moment. And what if I fail? Like, what if my business doesn't grow to the extent that I want it to? But I had to make that decision. And it was honestly one of the most freeing things that I did in my life. And even those same people that were questioning me or telling me not to leave that job are now like, oh yeah, like great job. Like, you're killing it. And it's because I took that risk. And again, sometimes it is scary and it can be taxing. But ultimately, when you make decisions that are really rooted in like true intention and true identity, the results, even if it takes time, are so beautiful because you feel good inside.
Yeah, that's such a good example. An example of you making a decision based off how you felt. Okay, I want to get even more granular on that and comparing those two periods of your life, how you felt then and how you feel now. So when you were in that space where you were like, okay, this career, it's not resonating. I'm not on top of my game. I know that this is like not great. Were you able to pinpoint what about it wasn't working for you? Because I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up, where it's like, I feel like something is off here, but we can't identify what.
Yeah. For one, I think I was doing too many things at once. I think any entrepreneur that has a 9 to 5 in the beginning stages, it's a period that we all have to go through. But ultimately, when you are working nonstop, you cannot do that forever. So I think one of the things that kind of halted me was just I was doing way too much and it was not sustainable. And then another thing was just there was no joy and no learning in the work that I was doing. It felt very much like it was a job that I was like clocking into and leaving. And it was so nice to have that experience of being able to compare it to someone else, because I think a lot of people don't know what that next step or that passion feels like. But during the time I had already started Inside the Now and we were about 2 years in, and I knew exactly what it felt like to do something that you loved and that brought you joy and energy. Even on the hard days, you felt like you were in the right field and you were making a difference. And so having that direct comparison was really easy to be like, okay, I know I need to dedicate more time to the thing that actually makes me feel good and is bringing joy to myself and is also having a positive impact on other people.
It sounds like you were able to do some of that reflection that we talked about earlier of asking yourself the questions of, okay, how is it that I want to feel? What is it that's not resonating here? I found something that is resonating more. Can we talk a little bit more about your life now and how you feel now on the day-to-day?
Yeah, I honestly feel great. And like, I feel so grateful to be able to say that, because when I wake up in the morning, I feel just like a sense of joy because there's a level of control that I have in my life and purpose. Like, again, as I mentioned before, even on the hardest days, I know this is exactly what I'm supposed to do. And it feels so aligned with both my identity, but also my strengths and the highest version of myself, like what she would be doing. And I remember when I was first starting my business back in 2020, one of my favorite feelings was like this excitement. Even going to bed at night, it was like an exciting feeling because I knew that I was going to wake up in the morning and be doing more of what I love. And that is a feeling that once you experience, it's like you never want to let it go. And it comes in like ebbs and flows. Like, not every day I feel 100% and not every day I feel great. And that's something that I also want to debunk. But overall, like, I just feel so happy and so aligned, and it's great to be able to say that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun to be able to fill out those pages with the gratitude.
Yes.
It just makes all the difference.
Right.
It does kind of feel, I think that like when you are going through the hard periods and you're getting something out on a page, it is cathartic. And then also when you go through the good periods and you're able to put the goodness on the page, it's almost like journaling about the good things lets you experience more of it.
It does. It truly does.
Which is just, it's it's why everybody should do it.
I know. It's funny because something that we even talk about a lot is a lot of people some people have a resistance to journaling, especially if it's something that they haven't tried before. And I always say it may not be for everyone, because I know for me, I have a really hard time opening up to other people. So I need my journal, like, physically. But I think just try it. I think that's one of the most amazing things about life. You can try it, see if it works for you. And if it does, it can be such a like beautiful and healing practice. But if not, it's fine. Like, no pressure.
Yeah, definitely. I also want to talk about just the act of physically writing, because I think that there is something about pen to paper that is so magical and good for your brain. And I'm a digital girly too. Notes app looks a mess. I mean, I probably have like thousands of notes in my iCloud at this
Same.
point. We all do.
Yes.
They all don't make sense. Like, we live in a digital world, but there is something about taking pen to paper that just helps us process things differently.
Yeah, I think it goes back to creativity. I think there is like something very creative about doing something physical, like putting pen to paper. Again, we live in a very digital world. So we're on our phones, we're on our devices all day. And to have a practice where it doesn't involve those things, I feel like it allows you to connect with yourself a little bit more. But again, I also very much support digital, whatever works for you, honestly. I also have a very, very crazy and in-depth notes app. We actually just launched an app for Inside and Out as well.
Amazing.
So for people that want to journal on the go and take it wherever you want. But something awesome that I've realized lately is I get my best ideas when I'm putting pen to paper, specifically on airplanes. I don't know what it is, but every time I travel, I'm on an airplane and I journal, like I always have my best ideas. So there's something there for sure.
There definitely is something there. I've talked a little bit on the podcast because I'm going through The Artist's Way, that book right now. And a big part of that book is doing your daily morning pages. And sometimes the morning pages are rough. 3 pages.
3 pages is a lot.
It's a whole lot. Yeah. Some days it's like I got it and I zoom through it. And some days I'm like, I don't have 3 pages in me. But somehow getting to that 3rd page, there's always something that comes out that, I didn't know was there, or different ideas. Or, if I sit down at my computer, I'm racking my brain to come up with something. And then somehow in my journal, it just all comes out. It's almost like taking the pressure off of brainstorming.
Exactly.
Helps you just generate more ideas.
Yeah. And I think a great approach to it is not necessarily sitting down and saying, I'm going to brainstorm, or this is exactly what I'm going to do in this journal right now. I think one of the amazing things is sometimes you just release what's on your mind. And when you release, sometimes that leads to brainstorming. Sometimes that leads to like talking about something you've been struggling with lately. It could lead to so many amazing things. But that's why I also love morning pages, is because it kind of forces you to just dump everything that's on your mind.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I be complaining so much more on the pages than I do out loud.
That's fair. I also complain a lot in my journal too.
It's a safe space.
Yeah, it's a safe place. We can be negative.
Right.
We can be negative a little bit.
We're getting it as long as we do it with the intention of like, this is a release, not like I'm going to stew.
Exactly.
But sometimes it is kind of funny to go back, and even journals from not that long ago. Like I, have some journals from maybe like 2020, 2021. I'm like, oh, I was down horrendous. And it's okay.
And what also makes me realize that life is just going to be okay is also looking back at your old journal entries, because you realize like how sad you seemed or how stressed you seemed. And then you look at yourself present day and you're like, I don't even think about that anymore. Or like sometimes you'll be talking about a person and I'm like, this person I do not think about.
Exactly. Who? Exactly.
Yeah, who is that?
Yeah. And it's a good gauge to see how far you've come.
Exactly.
If you ever are feeling down, go look at some old journals. You'll feel better about how far you've come.
Yes.
So we talked a little bit about business earlier, but I would love to get into business even more, because I just think that the founder space is so interesting. I love talking to Black women founders, particularly people who start off in a side hustle and end up taking it to full time. How has your approach to entrepreneurship changed as your company has grown and evolved?
That is such a great question, because I've evolved so much with my brand. Back in 2020, I actually had no idea what I was doing. It was very much started as a passion project, watching YouTube videos on every little thing that I can learn at the time. But now I think in this season of my journey, I've been really, really thinking about brand, which is so interesting because a lot of building a brand is figuring out who that brand is. And if that brand was a person, who would they be? I recently did a character study, which was really fun, which was like, what is my brand's big 3? And like, if they went to a coffee shop, what would they order? Just because it's identity. And when you're talking to people, people resonate with a person more than they resonate with a brand. And it's so synonymous with even your own identity, because it goes back to asking yourself, these questions and figuring out who you are and what your interests are and how you would show up and talk to people. So it's so crazy that like my journey in just like self-discovery and awareness is very synonymous with me also growing my brand.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like having a business is just an exercise in personal development. It is the best thing. I think businesses and relationships, if you want to grow as a human,
It's the best teacher.
it's going to be the best.
It is the best teacher. And I that just sums it up perfectly because I've learned so much over the past couple years just about myself and about how I show up in work. I'm managing a team now. That is a whole job in itself, dealing with other people and really uniting like for one singular identity, but you will grow. Like there's nothing like starting a business to help you grow. It's like having a child. It's like your little brand baby that you're raising and especially when you come with good intentions and you really want to build something great, it is really taxing and you do spend a lot of just time thinking about how to be better.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would love to talk about your transition also from doing it as a side hustle to full time and more specifically what that looked like for you. So when you knew that it was time to take it full time, what you had to prepare and get in order to feel comfortable making that leap and the difference that, you felt running your business as a full-time founder.
Yeah, I had to get my money in order for sure. I think it is important that I think a lot of people as business owners, you think, okay, I need to do this full time immediately. And that is a lot of people's goal. But I think it is really important to have that space where you have both and you have that security blanket because what it allows you to do is really, really invest in building your brand first. When people don't have issues with money, sometimes it masks a lot of the problems that they have in business. So I was fully bootstrapped. I started with $5,000, which was my savings from college internships. But something I struggled with is like, oh yeah, I feel like I never really have enough money and I'm constantly being really scrappy and I'm figuring out how to make it work with very little. But something that it really taught me was how to really build something great that people resonate with. Because when you have a ton of money, like people who start with a lot of investments, a lot of them will tell you sometimes money masks problems, right? Because if you have a lot of money, usually you'll make more of it. But when you have a little bit, you really, really learn about how to be scrappy. So I think that was a really important part of my personal journey. And then again, it just allowed me to invest back into the business. I didn't have to worry about paying myself. I didn't have to worry about how I was going to make ends meet and how I was going to pay my rent. I also made a lot of sacrifices during that time. So I moved back in with my parents. I was fulfilling from their garage. Like it was definitely not the most glamorous lifestyle during that moment, but it really, really just transformed me in terms of the dedication that I felt for the business that I was building. And when I finally decided that it was time to leave was one that I had listed out some very specific financial goals. So I wanted to be able to replace the income that I needed to sustain myself. And that I also knew that even with paying myself, I knew that I can invest the same amount that I was before back into the business so that it can continue to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Such good insight. And I think it's like going back to this theme that we've had this whole conversation is knowing what it is you need. So that number for you is going to be very specific to your lived situation, your business. Someone else can't tell you what that is. You're the one who knows what that is.
And so many people will ask that question too. When do you know that it's time to quit your 9 to 5 and go full time in your business? And there is no one right answer for sure. Again, you always want to make sure that you're prepared. You don't want to end up in a situation in which like you don't have money and you're stressed out. But again, it's about figuring out what works for you and what you're willing to sacrifice to make that decision too, because it is going to be a little bit of a sacrifice.
Most definitely. Yeah. I'm curious. Okay. Because you mentioned big three for the business. Something that I did this a long time ago and I like to refer back to it often is run like the astrology of my business. So
Okay.
I put the birthday and birth time as like when the first episode of this podcast aired. And then I ran like a whole birth chart as if it was a person. Like, when did the first episode go live? What city was I living in? And created like the whole birth chart to understand like the astrology of the business. You mentioned your business had a big 3.
Yes.
What is the astrology of Inside the Now?
Okay, so that's so funny. So the sun sign is Virgo/Libra, and it was hard for me to choose one. The reason it's Virgo, it was actually born around my birthday. I'm also a Virgo, and it was born August 27th. And one of the things that I think is really important is just like that discipline, that like focus that Inside the Now has. But the Libra side is that creativity. So I love art. I love making things beautiful. I love packaging and product design. I think that is like really important to Inside the Now's identity. And then their rising is their emotional side. So they're like a Cancer/Pisces. And then their moon sign is Sagittarius. So more of that adventurous side. I think sometimes when we think about journaling or wellness, we think it has to be this very like boring, like mundane in the house thing. And something that I want to bring in Inside the Now is just like, the cool thing about journaling is it allows you to live life more on purpose and you figure out what your interests are. What I might be writing about is very different from what you might be writing about. And it's about your interests. So if you like cooking, if you like traveling, if you, whatever it is that you love, I think that will come out a lot in your journal entries. So that's something that I'm trying to bring out more with the brand.
Yeah, I love that. I can totally see all of those signs in the brand. I think it being a Virgo sun totally makes sense. That is like its core, but then those other elements are totally there.
Exactly. I'm curious, what is yours?
A Libra, funny enough, which when I created it, I was not thinking about at all. I wasn't that into astrology back then. I launched this podcast in October 2018. And then a few years later, I was like, oh, what if I run the birth chart for this business?
I'm actually going to do that because I haven't
You should do it for your launch date and, you know, your city, and have that be like, when was this born? And what was super interesting is that it was born during Libra season, which makes sense. The scales balance, but also has a lot of Aquarius placements. And Aquarius is a sign that's all about like the collective and community and the greater good, which so resonates. But I had no idea at the time. It almost kind of like a baby is going to be born when it's time, when it's ready to come out. I kind of feel like businesses, it's the same thing. Yeah. They have their own energies to them.
Yeah, for sure. And it's crazy too, because when I was first starting the brand, when I first came up with the idea, I had this immediate moment, which was like, aha, like this is exactly what I was supposed to do. And it was almost like my life had flashed before my eyes. Like all of my experiences were preparing me for this moment. And it was just such a beautiful like experience to be able to be like, oh yes, this is exactly what I'm supposed to do.
That is like such a gift. What a beautiful realization to have that happen, and to have that happen so young.
I know.
So I'm curious what your current wellness routines look like now. Obviously journaling. Yeah. I'm sure it's a big part of it. What else are you doing for self-care?
So something lately I've realized is I need to be outside in the morning specifically. I work from home and I was letting too much of my day go out without seeing the sun. And a little fun fact about me, I was born in West Palm Beach, Florida. I need palm trees. I need the sun to feel happy. And so lately I've actually been leaving the house and doing workout classes just so I can get a little bit of sun. Like I'll take a little walk to my class. And it's just been honestly so amazing and starting my day on a different note, because even I think in the first stage of my business, I thought that pouring into myself first in the mornings was working on my business first and then giving to my 9 to 5. But in this season, I'm also realizing that like I am not just my business. So pouring into me and my movement and being active in the morning and just seeing the sun and being outside has been really, really great for me.
Oh, that's so good. Pouring into you first is so important. And I love what you said about the importance of getting outside, like getting that sun, getting that fresh air. Yeah. And I think it lends itself well to what we were talking about earlier, of taking some of the rigidity out of wellness. Yeah. Because it can feel so prescriptive of, I have to work out this much and eat this much protein and do this, or I journal this many pages. And all of those other things are wellness. Like
Yeah.
seeing the palm trees is wellness, leaving the house, spending time with your friends, getting like your social cup filled. It's all
Exactly.
wellness.
And even something that I've been talking about lately too is there's since becoming a founder in wellness, I've had a lot of imposter syndrome because, again, going back to society kind of paints this persona of what a wellness girly looks like. And sometimes I didn't feel like I fit that persona. And so I was scared to post certain things. I was scared to post when I was going out. I was scared to, like, I felt like everything had to be like gym, journal, like that. Those were the only things that I could post. And so I'm actually really working on just developing this like inner confidence of like wellness doesn't look one way. And it's important to talk about those things because I think a lot of people feel that pressure even in the wellness industry.
Oh, yeah, but it has to be so prescriptive. Or if we do work in the wellness space, then we have to be perfect at it all the time.
Yeah,
I felt
exactly. And you
that.
can't slip up, you can't make mistakes, you can't have fun. Something even with the workout classes I've been taking is like I was trying different things. I'm like, what is actually fun for me? What is something that I want to wake up and take versus what people tell you your workout routine looks like? So for me, I recently found this workout place in Miami. It's called Glute House. And there's like literally a place that just focuses on your glutes. And I love like I'm a girl, like I love lower body. It's been so fun to do that. I've also been doing Legree, which is like very similar to Pilates. And I've been going to like this black owned place that plays a lot of like R&B. They even play like Jamaican music. And I love that. So just like finding the things that, again, actually make you feel good and you want to wake up and do versus what somebody else tells you should feel good for you.
Yeah, I love what you just said about the studio and having the whole experience be immersive and joyful. Like, yes, the movement, the exercise is great, but what are the vibes like?
Yeah,
What is the
what are the
community
vibes?
like? That's
Yeah.
wellness too.
Exactly.
Because if you're in this space with maybe a bunch of like gym bros or something, you can get a good workout, but like, does that feel good? Do you want to be
Exactly.
there?
Yeah, who else is in that space? Like, are you connecting with the people that are in that workout space? I think that is so important and not talked about enough for sure.
No, because those are the things that keep us coming back and that
Mhm.
help us stay consistent with it.
Exactly.
For sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I was when you were talking about gym and like gym journal, I was thinking about Jersey Shore, how they used to be like gym, tan, laundry, like
Yes.
how prescriptive that was. I'm like, I don't want to be like a dude on the Jersey Shore.
Yeah.
So rigid.
Yeah, and it's really striking the right balance too because I think routine is so great and a lot of like productivity and joy can come out of a good routine, but at the same time your life is not a to-do list. And just remember to live your life. Like anytime we're even having conversations about work-life balance, like remember life. Like what do you want your life to look like? And I think that is really, really important because it doesn't have to be mundane. It doesn't have to feel like a checklist. And your needs can change. So even now I'm waking up and like going to the gym in the mornings. It wasn't always like that. Sometimes I tend to other needs. So it's important to just check in with your mind and body and figure out what is working for you in that season of your life.
100%. It's like routines are great and they serve us to a point. And then every once in a while we can assess, okay, is this still working? What can I tweak? What do I need now?
Yeah.
How can I revise it a little?
And there's also this aspect of even if you have the same routine, not every day is going to feel amazing. That's something I've had to realize about myself lately because the other day I just had a really off day and I'm like, why am I having an off day? Like I went to the gym, like I saw the sun. What do you mean? And I think it's important to also remember that you're not always going to feel 100% and nobody does. Like everybody experiences these highs and lows. And just because, again, you have like this quote unquote perfect wellness routine, it's really about listening to your body and your mind and tending to those needs.
Absolutely. Being that inner influencer for
Yes.
yourself.
Inner influencer.
Yes.
I'm going to start saying that.
Absolutely. New tagline.
Yes.
Nya, thank you so much for joining me. Can you please let our audience know how they can keep in touch with you, where they can find Inside Then Out products, what you have coming up?
Yeah, so you can find me personally on Instagram at Nya Jones, and you can also find Inside Then Out at insidethenout.com. We're also on Instagram and TikTok at Inside Then Out. But thank you so much.
Yes, we'll have all of your information linked in the show notes to make it super easy to find.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Oh my gosh, thank you for joining me. I love this conversation. Okay, y'all. So you have homework. I want you to start journaling if you're not already. We also talked about that exercise of going through our calendar or our to-do list and having the why next to what we're doing so that we can really reflect on what's resonating for us. You can go to my latest Instagram post. Let me know how it went. Let me know how you're feeling if you're journaling. Again, head to the show notes to check out Inside Then Out's amazing resources to help you take care of yourself from the inside out. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please make sure that you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple, wherever you're at, I got you. So subscribe so that you don't miss an episode, and I will see you next time.